Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar called Doing More with Less, Turning Change Management into Measurable Impact. I'm super excited about this topic as we are all being asked to do more with less. And we're seeing it across industries. So we're seeing change and transformation leaders being asked to deliver more. Um, to have better data and better tools. Um, we're being we're being asked to do things with fewer resources, with smaller budgets, with tighter timelines. And today we're going to explore how to achieve that measurable impact and rethinking about transformation and how we plan and measure and lead change. And my name is Tim Morton, and one of the co-founders of Prompt AI. I've been working in change and transformation my entire career. Um, really passionate about helping people get to from where they are today and bringing that vision to life and reducing anxiety along the way. And one of the big points of my career was back in 2018 when a global CIO who was very pleased with the work we'd been doing said, "Why aren't you using data to drive transformation?" Because they were using data across their business. And from there, we really looked to pivot our business and provide change leaders with better tools and better data and insights and really elevate that role of the change leader. And I'm so pleased today to be joined by Donna. Donna, I'm going to just hand it over to you for a moment to introduce yourself, but I'm so thrilled you're here with us today.
Thanks, Tim, and happy Monday, everyone. I'm Donna Hoy, and I actually started my career in marketing, focusing on growth marketing. But then over time, my skills kind of evolved and grew into not just marketing, but sales, business development, customer experience, and more recently, change management. And the reason why change management is so important to me was in the tech industry. I worked on the product side, and it was just hard for our end users to actually transition from, say, something that was a manual process to an automated process, and more so AI. And I felt like change management would help kind of expedite and smooth out the process, and more importantly, provide that human-centered design. So my career, although it's multifaceted, is always about the customer experience.
Wow. Thanks, Donna. And that whole move from manual to automated has been huge. And thanks to those that are joining us live and those that are watching the recording. For those joining us live, please do put your comments into the Q&A, and we'll look to address them as we go. We'll also be sharing the slides following this presentation, and we'll make the video available as well. So from an agenda perspective, we're going to go through a few questions. We'll have time for Q&A, and just to kick it off here, uh, this really says it all. There is a lot of pressure. We're all feeling it, and we're having to deliver. We're having to deliver faster, quicker, better with fewer resources. And that 70% of transformations failing due to poor readiness. We're seeing that across the board. We're even seeing higher numbers for AI transformations. We're seeing so many of those AI transformations not even getting past the pilot stage. Within M&As, we're seeing failure rates over 90%. So, it's it's sad. And one of the reasons I first got into this field was that whole thought that it doesn't have to be like that. And we want to talk today about, how do we how do we achieve measurable impact? How do we rethink, how we manage transformation? And I think it's so important as we're working, as we're working through this to think about how do we give better tools and better insights? How do we stop using yesterday's tools to solve today's problems? That's just so important. Donna, your thoughts?
Absolutely. Although I will say, in terms of legacy systems, uh, there's often a divide between having people who have worked on legacy systems to those who are providing new solutions. And there should be a lot of also great respect for those who actually set up systems that are currently being used and acknowledgement in terms of the contribution. Because once again, at the time, individuals were tasked with something and they were at the time thinking this is the best solution in place. But in terms of transitioning, once again, thinking about like how do we acknowledge what currently exists and also what currently works well? Because there is a mindset once new systems are in place, existing legacy systems need to be trashed. And honestly, that does create a divide between two groups, and it doesn't have to be that way. So, in order to acknowledge what was currently done, we also have to work alongside those who were familiar with the setup.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that we're seeing as well is we're seeing those transformation leaders being resistant to actually changing in new ways of operating. That's one of that that's one of the things that we're seeing here. We see those 70% across the board of transformations that are failing. But for those that aren't, where you've got a really strong change and transformation leader, those ones, they are finding ways to be successful. They're doing the best with the tools they've got. And there's a bit of a resistance from those folks to adopt new tools and new methods because they know that what they're doing has worked. It's just it's how do we continue even as change practitioners to leverage new tools and and new ways of working ourselves and being open to addressing these issues. So well, why don't we jump into the discussion a little further, and I'd love to get your thoughts, uh, Donna, about when we as change leaders are told to do more with less, where do we typically cut corners, and and what's at risk?
Good question. There's also not just doing more with less, but the being quick about it, and the pressure to deliver faster is also reflected. And in terms of cutting corners, one area, and I will reflect on, say, the product side, is just a lack of discovery at times. Um, Whether or not it's getting feedback from end users or not doing enough in the prepping and planning, in the discovery, and wanting to jump in right away to deliver. That's one area where corners are being cut.
Yeah. And even when I think about some of the different change frameworks and change methodologies that are out there, one of the things we see too is it assumes that a discovery has already happened. And so often it's so important that thinking about that end user and thinking through and really understanding their sentiment, their lived experience, where they're at, where they're coming from, is is so essential. And I love this. I love this word cloud you've provided, because if I, when I look at it, you can't not see cost jumping out, and I see price and pricing and money and it's very loud, and it's very loud and clear where a good deal of the pressure is coming.
Perhaps like maybe we can open it up to the floor and get some feedback.
Yeah, I think that would be I think that'd be a great idea. So from those joining us today, where are you seeing corners being cut most often in your organization's change efforts? And you know, I'll tell you, while we're doing that, I'll tell you what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot where there's internal resources that are supporting change and transformation, and in the past where they might have been supporting one big complex transformation, they're being asked to support two, three, four. They're being spread thin. We've also seen where uh, project managers are being asked to provide both change management and project management support, and wear those multiple hats. How about for you, Donna?
Um, so aside from like, yeah, you mentioned wearing multiple hats, there's also situations in the past where I will say from a sales perspective, you're still expected not just to reach out to existing customers, but your targets are continuously growing. And the resources being provided still remain the same. So that's one area in terms of executive members expecting these like big metrics.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that we're seeing as well is so often organizations and specific leaders, they're underestimating the risk of the human side of transformation. And with that, they're seeing, poor adoption that's leading to delayed return on investment and a lot of rework. And I'll share one example, is across the board, we're seeing companies rushing to put in AI-enabled transformations, and that focus on, hey, this is new, this is exciting, it's a good change, people are going to love it. And of course we know they resist, and we know that there's a lot of fear and apprehension about uh, not only my role but the tools that I use and how I'm going to get work done, and how things get reported. And what we're seeing is that lack of engagement. We're seeing a lot of times that these projects and programs are being led by IT without proper business involvement and business engagement. And that's a huge issue and a huge red flag. And so often what happens in these situations is IT pushes forward that, thinking about, oh, you know what, this will provide this tool and this tool and this tool, we'll get that, we'll roll it out, people will use it. But if people aren't part of the process, and one of the things that we say is not for us without us. And it's really
Yes.
thinking about, this is not an IT implementation. This is a business transformation that is leveraging an an IT enabler, which is AI. And it's just so important to involve the business from start to finish.
Yep. And to our participants today, I know Tim and I are riffing back and forth, but anytime, please put your comments in the chat, whether it's questions or your POV. We'd love to hear from you. And Tim, you did mention in terms of just the upfront discovery, we know that when you actually do a proper upfront discovery, so that is allotted in 10 to 20% of the projects, it's as much as 50% reduction in any sort of rework. So that's quite incredible when you see this proportion.
Yeah. And one of the really important things about that upfront discovery as well is so often from a discovery perspective, there can be um, you know, interviews and meetings with leaders, but so often we're not listening at scale to everybody that's actually impacted. And it's so important that as part of that discovery, we really need to understand what's happening, what are the pain points, what are the concerns, what are we trying to solve, what is our vision, and clearly how are we going to bring that vision to life. And as you stated, giving that 10 to 20% for upfront discovery, but really making it a robust discovery where we are involving and enabling everybody that touches this to have their say. So we're going in with a great amount of information. And yeah, it's so important. We see this rework that's happened. Oh, we didn't think about that, or we didn't factor that in, or oh, this wasn't part of our original scope. And it's just so essential to starting well, understanding the sentiment of those, getting those pain points forward, and really making it as robust as possible. So Donna, I love this slide.
Yeah. And I recall in one of the previous projects I was working on, and as much as uh, you think you've got like a lot of experience, like SME, a certain group has that tribal knowledge to proceed without discovery. Sometimes, if you don't validate those assumptions with the people who are actually using it, those assumptions might be more of a distraction and add additional costs. So hence, like, I remember we were trying to launch a product really quickly and had a handful of feedback from end users, but in the end, it wasn't thorough and robust enough. And yes, even though we saved time to getting a product to launch, it wasn't necessarily a minimal viable product. So in the end, I had to do actually a review, a reassessment, and then of course, more thorough discovery and feedback, voice of customer feedback, just to make sure we were on the right path again.
Yeah. And even even as you said, doing the best you can with the tools you've got at your disposal, but as well, sometimes too, if people are being asked their opinion and they don't feel safe, they're sometimes going to share what a leader wants to hear, as opposed to what really is going on. And I think that's just essential.
And that's the perfect segue to the next slide.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
really blocking change?
Yeah. And isn't it amazing? We see that we see that iceberg, and really think about you've done a great job in breaking it into those three parts. And one of the things that we're seeing with 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 leveraging AI sentiment is some of that 90% that was previously hidden around the culture, we're actually starting to see it and get a real sense of what really is, what really is happening under that. And it's so essential. Like if you're looking to really move an organization forward, it's so important that you do understand what are people's capabilities, how much change can they go through, do they have the soft skills and the tools to do this, uh, if they do this, are they going to still be able to serve the needs of their customers? So it's just so essential that we think and we get that information so that we're not operating on the 10%. We're really getting a full robust picture of the situation.
And once again, just going to throw it out there to the audience in terms of chiming in, you know, in past initiatives, what has block changed for you? And
Yeah.
as you think about that, I'll give another example. There was a large transformation from moving from one CRM system to another. So using legacy to a new solution. And although it made business sense and the system being launched was an absolute amazing CRM system, the plan came into place. There was a digital transformation leader. However, it was rather abrupt. It was more so of a top-down approach, focusing, emphasizing on like by this date, everything's going to migrate over. You're going to be like participating in the migration. So that 10% of organizational change moved forward. However, when you look at the 90% aspect, which is cultural, the resistance came from individuals not understanding the process, what was happening, the various functional areas, not being given a lot of direction or support. So, in that respect, yes, it moved forward, but the resistance came from not having the proper communications, expectations managed. And what happened eventually was, playbooks had to be developed for various cross-functional areas so they could understand the horizon, the timelines, what's in it for me or what's in it for the division. And once that happened, then the transformation migration actually happened a little more smoothly.
Yeah, that's a great example. And one of the things that we've been seeing too is when leaders only have that 10%, decisions are being made to solve problems which may not actually be the problem. And throwing dollars at a problem that may not exist. And we've seen it with other organizations where we had seen one organization had been trying to solve a problem because an employee had shared with a leader that this was the problem. One of the things we were able to see was that wasn't actually the real problem. That was so low on the list of related problems, and they were taking into account one person with a loud voice and their perspective, not what was actually happening within the workforce for employees, for people managers, for other leaders cross-functionally. And it was so important, even for this leader to understand that if we can't listen at scale, if we can't understand uh, what people need, what they want, what's important as we're moving through transformation, we may be trying to solve a problem that just actually doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
I love this. I just love this slide, and thinking through, how do we, start to do work differently? How do we give change and transformation leaders better, more insightful data and better tools? And one of the key things, and this was, I shared that story about 2018 with why aren't you using data to drive transformation? And that's been a huge call out for us. And even with that example I just shared, it is so important to understand sentiment of those people that are going to be impacted by that change. That could be people internal to your organization, it could be your partners, it could be your customers. And if you can
Absolutely.
understand in a safe way, what are they concerned about? What are they fearful? Where are the people related risks? Where are the risks to process? It's just so important that we understand, the voice of that stakeholder. What do they want? What's it going to take them to get engaged, to get on board, to get, to adopt and get ready? And how do we take them on that journey? And if we create change and transformation plans because we've always done it that way without understanding sentiment, it's 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 likely going to end up being part of that 70%. And there's different things we can leverage as well. So we're leveraging sentiment, but it's also so important that we also gather insights from other collaborative tools that people are using. And there's a few examples there, like what gets created on whiteboards or Teams chats or tools like Mural. Just so essential.
Yeah.
Donnie, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was gonna actually start off and level set in terms of what we mean by sentiment data. I know that there are misperceptions that sentiment relates to just the touchy feely stuff, but understanding not just how individuals feel, so the why behind engagement or disengagement, but also the preferences in terms of how employees or customers want to be communicated with, the preferences in terms of how they want to be engaged with is actually critical to the level of adoption and engagement. So sentiment data does give us a more robust picture of the individual.
Yeah, it's so true. It gives us another lens
Yeah,
when we actually understand what's behind the data and what people want and need. Instead of having a change plan for everyone, we can start to segment and target change efforts. Because,
absolutely.
as we talked about, we're being asked to do more with less. So we've got less resource. If we have a clear understanding of where the resource is needed, we can we can target those specific resources. And that's been one of those key components. When I can see that a certain location or a certain team has an issue that needs to be addressed, but another team may not care at all about it, I don't want to waste that one team that doesn't care. I want to make sure I'm pinpointing and addressing what needs to be addressed specifically without wasting people's time in other areas. And that's really fundamental, because what we see in one functional area, or potentially say with one specific group, may not be at all an issue or something that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Which also brings us to the next point, and we focused about like tying sentiment and employee response to measurable outcomes. So
Yeah. Oh, please do continue, and I'll jump in after.
Sure. So, there's a four-pronged approach. So, starting with sentiment, understanding the employee and the customer, or the customer and the reason why, in terms of, how they feel about a certain initiative, but also moving to the next step of making sure that they're being engaged. And there's metrics that can be established throughout these areas. And from an adoption perspective, what is happening with the initiative or the employee. And lastly, especially from a leadership perspective, you're looking at the return on investment. And you can even measure it and break it down from a customer experience and even an employee experience, because all of this creates a picture in terms of influencing not just customer experience or employee experience, but retention and revenue. And I always like to do a bit of journey mapping. So whether it's a CX or EX map, and at every stage of the journey, you can also establish metrics, whether it's behavioral metrics or perception metrics, and even operational financial metrics. And this is how you definitely tie the adoption initiatives to measurable outcomes.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a recent transformation that one of our teams supported, and one of the things that they did on this transformation, it was a very complex transformation, and they were really trying to move the organization rapidly, and there was a great impetus to do that. And so one of the things that we were able to do as a team was create agile change sprints. So this was a game changer for this client, and really created a movement. So they were able to understand the sentiment of everybody within the organization, and they turned that data or insight into action. So it was insight to action, very quickly understanding what the sentiment was, understanding how it differed for different demographics, for different areas, and being able right away to go to leaders and say, here's what we're hearing, here's the actions that people are looking to you to do over the next 6 to 8 weeks. At the same time, being able to go to people managers and say to people managers, here's what we're seeing, here's what's being asked of you, here are the actions that you're being asked to do again over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then going back to employees and saying, this is what we heard from you. This is what we're going to do. These are ways you can get involved and engaged in the process. And then after that sprint is over, doing it again. And what we saw was people getting involved and engaged, feeling more psychologically safe, feeling heard, understanding that they were making a difference. And with that, people getting engaged, adopting, and becoming ready. And in the end, what happens? You launch this, it's a non-event.
Yeah.
Because what you've done is you've moved the whole organization. People are engaged, they're involved. They understand the process, they understand the role they have to play, they're playing it. And not not just thinking about this, okay, this wasn't part of the 70%. This was a non-event. You're going to have a few bumps, but it was a very smooth transition. And that's the goal of this. So when we can use new ways of managing change, and these agile change sprints are a great example of how we tie adoption to outcomes. When we hear the voice of people, we act, we engage, they're ready.
Absolutely. And for me, uh, I'm going to jump to the last part, which is the ROI. And ROI is not always easy to measure, but you actually have to plan for this in advance. And I'll give you another example. I spoke at the beginning about, going from manual to automated workflows. And at one place I worked at, we actually figured out how to establish a time and effort analysis from individuals who were using our platform versus the previous, which was a manual process. So, for say every single manual task, we calculated that. But then when they started using the platform, so automated platform with some AI components tied in, we measured the time and effort to do that. And based on a time and effort analysis, what we were able to establish was that, there was a, say, 40% reduction of initiative reduced at stage one. And then, another stage of the process where individuals were doing something manual, we were able to cut that down by 60%. And if you can, project, based on these like big reductions of time and effort, the individuals not just were able to reduce, say, more administrative work, but for them, they identified, oh, well, I can spend more of my time working on uh, areas that work directly with the end user or the customer. And in this case, it was a healthcare company, so working more directly with the patient. And, you know, we also asked individuals, so aside from your professional job, like what areas would it benefit you personally? And they jumped in to say, okay, well, I can actually go home to my family earlier, right? I don't have to like spend X number of hours at the office, or I don't have to spend X number of hours more doing paperwork. So in terms of ROI, ROI means something different to everyone, but there's also a hierarchy of benefits. And that's the area that we try to really focus and hone on. And when you're creating communication, understanding what kind of communication works better based on how customers value this certain product.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful example, and it's so often what was happening was for years uh, they were saying, well, it's very hard to understand the return on investment from doing change. All that has changed now, and it's really changed by the tools we have available, and just thinking and understanding the impact of when we can create a movement and get people involved and engaged, and we can turn those new ways of working very quickly into ways of working and institutionalize those changes. It's uh it's tremendous, and the return on investment in getting people adopting, executing, and being proficient quicker is incredible.
So,
So, you know, this is of course an interesting one, because if we think I think about project managers as very you know this is something that of course they're very used to, but what if what if we think about ways organizations can start to embed agile change practices, you know like that example I shared earlier, and Donna, you were sharing about the upfront effort with with that, discover portion as well, and the difference that can make, and how tremendous it is getting a program off to the start, the right way.
Yeah. And, being agile is so important these days, because you set yourself up in little sprints. And then based on that, it's constantly learning, adapting. And I'll give an example in terms of one area I was responsible for business development. And rather than kind of do a broad and blunt approach for finding leads, we actually identified like key accounts that mattered to us and created like a targeted account-based management setup. So meaning based on say three key accounts that we were pursuing, we would develop content relevant to these groups and also start doing a discovery for, organizational structure, who are the influencers. And from there, we actually had a really good focus. And in the end, the net was we didn't spend a lot on a marketing and sales budget because we were focused on these three key accounts and really got more uptake and engagement from our prospects. So, in terms of this kind of agile change approach, we learned quickly, we were able to go out quickly and also refine as needed.
Yeah, and it's so important, to be thinking, to be thinking in these ways, and even from the start with that discovery, when we can go from insight to action, and those insight to action loops, the difference that makes, and accelerating how people get on board, get engaged, adopt, also understanding where those potential pitfalls are. Where's the hidden resistance? Where are where are the people, the process, and the cultural risks? And being able to adapt and pivot plans and really have a robust understanding of what is happening and being in tune across the organization. It's incredible when we can really track engagement and adoption real time. And when people feel safe and secure, they feel heard, they feel engaged. From a change management perspective, we are creating that movement, and it's something in the past that just wasn't doable without these new ways of working and these new ways of managing change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I realize I think this is our last slide. Yes, it is.
Well, Donna, I have to say, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with you. I love the stories that you present, and you know, everything that that you've been sharing. Do you have any closing thoughts for for us from a takeaway perspective, and also, uh, are folks able to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Donna Hoy. In terms of parting thoughts, doing more with less sounds scary, but at the same time, we've been given also more resources by way of using AI, and whether or not we want to adopt it, I will say I am optimizing AI and automation by way of even like taking notes, going through transcripts, right? So all that admin work that I used to hate doing, I'm doing less of, but also allowing me to actually take a step back and think more about planning and strategy. So that's been a welcome approach. And for individuals who And there have been surveys conducted, large scale surveys conducted to say, AI isn't really changing their lives. Well, AI is in place, just individuals might not realize that it's supporting existing systems.
Yeah. And for us, what we've seen is that ability to elevate the role of the change person. For years, you know, a lot of change people were thought of as very tactical and, oh, they follow a very rigid process. Well, what we're seeing now is AI people or change people leveraging tools like prompt to AI now are at the forefront. They've got a seat at the table with the steering committee. Leaders are listening to them. They want to know more. They want to understand what's behind the data. And they want to understand where their role is and where they need to dig in. And we've got
Absolutely.
we've got insights and data that was previously hidden that becomes incredible enablers for change leaders to really move organizations forward. And again, we are going to continue to be asked to do more with less. But if we
Yeah,
can use the tools at our disposal, if we can put those resources where they're needed, if we can help people to get on board, to stay on board, to get engaged, and finally, to make sure that they're ready so that when a go live happens, or when it's day one, or when we're flicking a switch, there's no surprises. People know what's changing, they know how it's changing, they know it's not changing, and they know where to get support, and they're ready. And one of the big things that we're seeing is we're ready, just turn on the switch. And, and we know because we can see movement happening. So thanks to everybody that's joined us today. Thanks to those that are watching the recording. And Donna, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, those wonderful examples, and real thought leadership. And looking forward to seeing everybody soon on another episode. Thank you, Donna. Thanks,
thank you.
everyone.
It's been
Have
a
a great
pleasure.
day.
Bye.